Hello, our module today covers how leisure impacts the economy, Part 1. First, you will need to have read Chapter 10 and taken the Chapter 10 quiz. I know, one of your favorite parts of the modules. And next, you're going to listen to the Balancing Leisure and Work lecture. And so some questions that we're going to cover today are, why work? Do we work for leisure? Or do we have leisure so we can work? And what is leisure's relationship to work? And down below, I do have a question for you to ask yourself. Although work offers the rewards of money, self-esteem, a sense of making a contribution to society, a lot of people are dissatisfied with work. And so what do you think? Should society place more emphasis on the values of leisure or more emphasis on the values of work? And you might take a moment to think where your values are. I like our cartoon with Calvin and Hobbes. I can give you a moment to read it, but Calvin basically says, how come grown-ups don't go out and play? Grown-ups can, but only justify playing outside by calling it exercise, doing it when they'd rather not, and keeping records to quantify their performance. Well, that sounds like a job, except you don't get paid. So play is worse than work? Being a grown-up is tough. True. Think about everyone you know who wears their Garmin or their TomTom, and they measure how far they walk, what they do, your Fitbit, so we are quantifying play. So our next slide discusses, why do we work? What is it? And if you look back in ancient societies, which we've had our history section, the ancient Greeks were built on a slave system. Their civilization was able to support leisure for the higher classes because they had slaves working. Therefore, they didn't have to deal with a lot of the manual labor. And then you have, through changes in religion and changes in society, this development of a work ethic with the rise of Christianity, specifically in the Middle Ages. And then we move on to more modern times, where a machine creates an assembly line during the Industrial Revolution. So you see the clock is invented, and then each person is making a specific product. And so therefore efficiency in production start to become really important versus simply providing subsistence for our culture. And then of course we move on to our early 20th century, where we have art and appreciation for more leisure time, and we really have a revolution that looks at quality of life. And so if you read in the book, it talks about two Latin terms and ways to describe work. And one is homo faber, which is human as a worker. And then the second one is homo ludens, which is human as a player. And so you have to ask yourself, is work for making possibilities happen that didn't exist? Or do we look at leisure for making the possibilities of work? Something to think about. And so lastly, I want you to examine work for leisure or leisure for work. Ask yourself, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, do you work to make money? To go play? Is that important to you? And is it just a job that you clock into? Or do you actually do work because you enjoy it? So there are three different perspectives that the book discusses on leisure. The idea of pro-leisure perspective is that leisure is paramount human condition, and it must be a part of our day. We have to have downtime, whatever that is, whether you like to go home and relax and watch TV, read a book, maybe you go ride your bike or go for a run, that it is an important human condition that needs to be part of your life. And some things that happen if leisure isn't a part of your life is that you become a workaholic. You have an addiction to work, and the book, as well as many health studies, has cited lots of health detrimental things to your health and side effects. One being like high blood pressure, depression, obesity. So being a workaholic can be just more than a mental aspect. It can also have physical problems. Play aversion. And you might have heard this about your generation, but it's this idea that every single hour is scheduled. So you play hard, you focus on being busy, you go from one activity to another. You might go to school all day and then go to soccer practice and then go to music practice and then come home and do your homework. You eat dinner at 8 o'clock and then you're in bed at 9 o'clock. And there's really no free time left for any type of spontaneity, which is another important component to life. And some people will even argue children, it's really important for them to have this free time where there aren't humans telling them the rules, and then they learn to play. And you might think about playing tag in the neighborhood or having a tree house, and kind of the skills that you learned when learning to play with your peers. The next perspective is pro-work. We must work. It provides us with purpose and worth. And so for a lot of us, our work is our identity. So you might ask someone what they do. I'm an attorney. I'm a doctor. For example, I'm a professor. So that is very central to my identity. And it might create also our life interest. We might move through the different stages of our career. Sometimes we decide we want a different career and we shift. And then the last perspective is this neutral perspective, where both leisure and work are desirable, and you really need to have a balance. And we're seeing very interesting trends right now. Originally, work for the past 60 years has doubled production in the US. And now you have a society that's questioning, do we need to be working this much? And the idea is called downshifting, where you choose more freedom and you choose the amount of time that you work. Maybe you share hours with someone, maybe you work part-time. And really, it's this idea to have a simpler life. So you're not spending a lot of money on a big car payment, a big house in the suburbs, memberships to gyms and doing all these things. You decide that you can live on a smaller budget. And maybe that means you only go out to eat once a month and you have friends over for game night versus going out to the bars. So there's definitely this idea of balance. And so if you wrap all of this together, ask yourself again, why am I working? Why am I getting a college degree? And what will be the ebbs and flows of that? And part 2, our next section, we're going to cover how this work and leisure really impacts the economy.